And we are live. So let's talk about the future of work and your job search during disruption. Because right now we do live in uncertain times. But for those of you who have not seen me before and for any reason are unfamiliar with my smiling face, my name is Erin Urban again, or Coachy Urban, and I am a Forbes Coaches Council member, a career strategist, and executive coach. Basically what I do is I leverage a whole host of really cool tools and certifications to help professionals remove their career roadblocks to achieve more impact, influence, and income. So without further ado, let's get started. The future of work. What does that look like for you? And as I mentioned before, we live in uncertain times. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a tough week. It's been a really tough week because I've had quite a few friends, colleagues being laid off, former colleagues, and it's been a really hard week. Some of my clients have had to lay off their employees, and it's been tough. It's been very emotional. So I don't know if you can relate to that. It's a really hard time out there. But I would like you to know that it is not as bad as some of the panic button pushers make it out to be. So before we get into that, however, let's talk a little bit about the future of work. And for those concerned about your careers, and rightly so, to those who are seeking necessary re-entry into the job market, everybody wants to know what is the hashtag future of work. With my research in behavioral science, sociology, leadership psychology, and my expertise in the careers industries, I have a few insights into what you can expect in the months to come. And what will the future of work look like, and how will it impact your career as we transition through and roll out of the current socioeconomic disruption. More immediately, this may come as no surprise to you, we will see a rise in remote work. What might come as a surprise to you is that the desire to collaborate with others one-on-one after the pandemic, and I was sharing with a group just the other day, my first act upon coming out of this current crisis is to just hug everybody. I am so tired of not being able to get any close to anyone. I'm a hugger. I know it's not everybody's thing, but I'm a hugger, so I'm going to hug everybody. But you may be surprised to realize that this particular desire to be social and collaborate with people one-on-one will pass quite quickly. So, with that being said, even though most professionals will be thirsty to see people again, our remote systems will be in place. Even those who have been resistant historically to having remote work as a necessary evil, well, those processes will be streamlined, more or less. And once the pandemic has passed, it won't take long for a new normal to arise, and with it, more online work opportunities. Now, a few people down here have said, Doug has mentioned, it's very obvious, I'm sure, but I'm not connecting to audio. Is there a place in this tool to connect, choose my audio headset versus computer, etc.? I'm not sure. I've never been on the other end of this. What you might want to do is just make sure that your sound is turned up and that you are on a browser that will support. Internet Explorer does not like this tool, FYI. It just doesn't. So yeah, there's nothing special in the software, and hopefully you guys can help each other out on that end, because I don't know, I'm presenter end. So let's get into our first poll while we're figuring out our audio-visual challenges. Let's see here. Polls. What do you expect? Now you'll see a survey there. How many of you expect to go back into an office? Or how many of you actually expect to go back into a physical office when it's over? Again, like not next week, but when this is passed, you know, or are companies actually considering, you know, maybe saving some money on real estate? Let's see, we got about 56%. So far, yes is leading the way. A few aren't sure. We have a few no's, but most people are still expecting to go back into the office. And you're probably right. You're probably right. And note that moving forward, it won't take long for businesses to figure out that they can save money by having people not come back into the office. And you see me smacking at something, it's because I have a jumping spider that has taken and keen interest to me over the past 3 days. I should just squash him, but I'm being nice. So let's end the poll here and share the results. As you can see, 77% have people have participated. Thank you. Most people expect to go back into the office once this is passed, because that's what they're talking about, right? Well, imagine how much money they'll save on real estate. So just be prepared that you may be looking at potentially not necessarily going back all full-time into a office space. It may be you can transition into remote work. And for those of you who want to transition into remote work, you might have more flexibility there. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. But remote work has its up and downsides. As a plus, it opens the door for even a more globally connected community. It empowers families to work from home, save on commutes, and benefit from a wider array of industry roles. And the potential of being almost completely virtual for all quote-unquote desk jobs is tremendous. As I mentioned before, it won't take long for companies to leverage that great savings on real estate. However, as the need to show up in the office declines, several other industries will take a hit. No shocker to anybody on this call, but oil and gas will suffer a reduction from the reduction in commuters. While our environment won't mind less pollution, our declining industries will need to pivot their business model to remain key players. You can also expect that there will be a rise in contract work versus full-time employment. So that gig economy that was kind of on the rise a number of years back, but got a little quiet, is back with a vengeance. Just expect there to be very much more of a gig economy moving forward. A lot more contract work, a lot less full-time roles. For those of you who are in transition, just be on the lookout for that, and please don't hesitate to go for those contract roles and on the interim, because they may be the new normal. So it's not just the energy sectors that are suffering or looking at this type of business transformation, as they call it. Now, those of you who are in business transformation or can pivot into business transformation, which is a really pretty way of saying we are outsourcing every stinking thing we can, you will have a job, because that particular role is very much in demand right now. However, real estate will suffer tremendously as the need to have an office declines and more office space hits the market. Industries that support office culture will also see changes as well. Take, for example, cleaning companies, landscaping, office equipment, and food preparation. So that awesome community coffee that you enjoyed in the workspace, yeah, they will probably see a downturn from this. So just keep that in mind. Let's see, what is in our chat box here? Oh, we're still helping ourselves. Okay, thank you for pulling together there and being a great community and helping people figure out what's going on. Okay, so the pandemic will pass, ladies and gentlemen, and with it, a new normal will arise. Industries on the upswing will be any company that will allow us to more easily isolate ourselves. This is a real thing. So while the socioeconomic disruption isn't exactly new for us as a human race, it is completely uncharted territory for two distinct generations. And because it's one of the first times we really had it sink in just how connected we are as a global community and how interdependent we are, or how we've become worldwide, this will start to impact people's emotional responses and often their decision making moving forward. And if you needed a proof that we are a global organism, well, now you have it, for better or for worse. So what's interesting is and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, is the emotional and psychological impact of what we're going through right now as we transition out of this particular crisis situation will impact decision making. So moving forward, things that have been beta tested right now, such as 3D immersion in conferences, 3D immersions in virtual meetings, and the like, will be a very heavy emphasis on all of that, because there are two distinct generations, Gen Y and Gen Z, who are vastly more virtual already anyway. They will find a need to be able to collaborate, more agile, more adaptable, and more engaging in these virtual spaces. So that will be an emotional, deep psychological, and automatic unconscious decisions as we move forward. So let's see here. That's not all bad news. It's not all bad news out there, because there are a lot of panic button pushers on the news and on social media. And I would like to share with you, anybody that's on this webinar right now, that while it's not good out there, right? It's not good. I mean, it's been a really tough week, as I shared before, but it's not as bad as some of the panic button pushers make it out to be. I have clients that are getting interviews right now. I have people that are being hired and onboarded virtually. There are roles that are being filled, and there are open job requisitions, and people are accepting applications. So it's not all doom and gloom, and there is a job search market out there. So if you're hesitant to go on the job search market, I just want you to know that it's not all doom and gloom, and we'll talk about that more here in a moment. Because, as I mentioned before, of the deep socioeconomic impact that this disruption is having on the masses, expect there to be a few quirky trends in the future. Okay, so while people are initially hungry for in-person contact, expect there to be a great deal of caution as we move forward, and that's understandable, right? Sadly, even though we will be propelled into a very virtual space, on the other hand, just keep in mind that at a fundamental level, our human brains and bodies need that in-person connection in order to release certain types of chemicals. I know that sounds very nerdy, but it's the explanation for that feeling that you get. And by the way, all your emotions are chemicals. So if I say releasing chemicals, that's basically what I mean. So that emotional response that you get in person with someone just isn't happening over the internet. Take, for example, this particular interaction right here would be so much more powerful for you and for me if it was in person. I mean, for one thing, you wouldn't have any audiovisual difficulties, right? I mean, we've got that going for us, but the experience itself is just not there in the virtual space. Irregardless, when it comes to your career, be prepared for the future of work and the fact that we will be propelled into a very virtual space. So any company that allows us as a society to work remotely and engage virtually will be on the rise. So if you're in the tech space, you're in a good place right now. So be prepared. This too shall pass, and with it will come a new normal. While it's early days yet, during this webinar, we will discuss some of the observations I have for the future and your job search. So with that being said, let's do another poll here. And you should see a survey. If you are looking for a job, do you hesitate at all right now? So if you're considering making a transition or looking for a new opportunity, does this current crisis situation make you hesitate? We have 46%, almost 70%. Okay, we've got the majority have responded. Thank you very much. I'm going to share the results. As you can see, we have 79% have responded. And if you're considering seeking new opportunities, vast majority of people are a little hesitant. Now, some people are like, nope, I'm going ahead, good for you. And a few people are saying, yes, I am a little hesitant. Well, I do have some good news for you. Go ahead and apply. Don't hesitate. So let's discuss that. I'm going to stop sharing results, close that, go back to my presentation. Here we go. All right, because this is what I know for sure. An effective job search is unfortunately a mystery to most professionals, and old tried and true methods don't necessarily work anymore. However, anyone can land a job online even now if you know the right process, which we'll be discussing during this particular webinar. Because honestly, the number one question I get right now from job seekers is, do I still go ahead and search for a job right now? Well, without hesitation, absolutely yes, you should do that. And here's why. Because the job search was already more vastly digital already, nothing much has changed in the hiring landscape. While people are working from home and practicing social distancing, for most recruiters, it's business as usual. And the myth that 80% of jobs are found through networking originated around 10 years ago. Right now, that number is closer to 45% or less. And while networking is important and still very powerful to elevate your career, it has a very different influence and purpose than it once did. Most importantly for you, how can the isolated job seeker see success in your job search, and what can you expect from the job search market during the current disruption? What we'll cover today is what are those job search myths that are holding you back, and how can you create an effective career growth strategy even during disruption? And most importantly, discover how to position yourself to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. So let's get started. And one of those job myths we've already gone over. 80% of jobs are found through networking. That is not the case. Now, I'm not saying that networking is not important, because it is important. It is very important. However, because of vastly more HR-controlled hiring processes, networking is not quite what it used to be, particularly with larger organizations. You can look at it like this. Basically, the larger the organization gets, the less impact that networking might have for you. The smaller the organization gets, the more impact networking might have for you. Now, I'm not saying networking is dead. That's not what I'm saying. However, just don't expect it to always have that same tangible result that it used to. It used to job seekers to be very comfortable with not even bothering to apply online, really leveraging their network and being able to land a job. Now that's not necessarily the case, particularly right now and moving forward. Even though the job search was vastly digital anyway, we will see even more of an emphasis on being focused on that digital sourcing, vetting, interviewing process. So the other job search myth we have is short resumes. If I hear one more time, shouldn't I have a short resume? No, you should not have a short resume for multiple reasons. One, a short resume does you a huge disservice when it comes to being able to fully express your career contributions. You just don't have enough room. Two, a short resume makes it very difficult for you to be highly relevant to the jobs you are seeking and be able to make it through applicant tracking systems because you don't have enough room. The good news is you can have up to 3 pages on your resume. You don't have to, but you can have up to 3 pages on your resume. That's perfectly fine. The only complaints I've ever received about a 3-page resume was when my client was in front of the hiring manager during the final interview. And the hiring manager said, oh yeah, the recruiter said they didn't like, that longer resume, but it really helped me. Okay. The other myth we have is listening to experts in your field tell you how to create your resume. There is great worth and value in collaborating and connecting with experts and SMEs in your field. However, they may or may not be a resume expert. So just keep that in mind. What worked for them may not be applicable right now. So go to experts in whatever it is. Using a cover letter to tailor your application, tailor your dossier to the application. Don't do it, because cover letters aren't sourced and vetted or sifted through applicant tracking systems. There's just an attachment hanging out there. If somebody wants to read it, they will. And less than 12% are read. So keep that in mind. You want to tailor your resume, not the cover letter. You need a cover letter. You have to have one. It's a check the box mentality, whether it's read or not, is irregardless, but just don't spend a ton of time on it. Applying for jobs that are a 100% match. I see this, interestingly, particularly in experienced professionals. Oh, I meet all the requirements. That means I'm guaranteed to get the job. No, in fact, you're probably not going to, because a hiring manager will look at your dossier, they'll look at the job description and go, these people are going to be bored in about 4 months. And they're probably right. So give yourself a little bit of a stretch room. A percentage is about 60% or better, depending on what the job requirements and what they're asking you to do. So leave some stretch room in there for you to grow into the role. Don't check all the boxes. Seriously, it's kind of a big deal. The other thing is believing HR professionals or recruiters know exactly how to navigate the job search. They don't. They know what they know within their, like with HR professionals, administrative side of HR, talent development, etc. And recruiters, they know about recruiting. They don't know how to navigate all of the ins and outs of the job search. And they're not applicant tracking system specialists. In fact, most HR professionals, they know about it, they use it, but they're not specialists. And these people are my clients. So keep that in mind. Thinking a recruiter will help you find a job. Recruiters work for employers, not employees. Just keep that in mind. So if you're not an ideal candidate, expect to hear no response. That's how they work. Don't take it personal. It's not you. It's just the system. Okay? Believing in a hidden job market. There is no such thing. There is no secret handshake society that they have like all the jobs and nobody else has. There's no such thing. That's ridiculous. What is a hidden job market? If you hear that being referenced, unless it's some scammer trying to get you to pay $8,000 for a resume or something ridiculous, it does happen, unfortunately. So what it is are those roles are actually created for individuals. Take, for example, my client is actually working with a group, and if they have the budget, they're going to create a role for her because they really want her on their team. That is the hidden job market, or those roles that for whatever reason were never really advertised to the public. Now, for most roles, most companies have requirements that they must post it on the internet so anybody can apply, but they don't have any intention of hiring anyone outside the company. They already have someone in line for this role, and it's just they're following the process. So that is the hidden job market. That's all it is. The other myth is thinking that a resume writer will write you a guaranteed applicant tracking system friendly resume. Not always. In fact, I've never seen one yet. I don't know what to say about that. Unless you have done the research and you absolutely know exactly what applicant tracking systems do and the technical side of it, I see a lot of very common mistakes out there, like using Times New Roman font. That's bad. Don't do that. I mean, just simple things that will work in about half of the systems, but the other half won't. So they're well-meaning, but maybe they don't understand it all. And they also don't necessarily work with job seekers to help them develop their career contributions. They really expect you to do that and provide them the information. They just write the resume. And that's what they're trained to do. So keep that in mind. They're good people. I mean, I have a certified resume writer. She's amazing. But I work with my clients to develop their career contributions. Make sense? So let's see. Do different companies have different kinds of ATS systems? Yes, they do. One that you'll see very commonly is like Tailor. So there's two major kinds, and I don't want to get too nerdy with you about it, but there's two big kinds of applicant tracking systems. One is when it accepts your resume and your application. One uses optical scanning to look at your resume. The other one does a parsing. So in other words, it breaks it down to plain text only, which can get pretty ugly. Particularly if you're using a PDF. So don't use a PDF. Use a Word document. It's better. The optical scanners, they don't care if you use a text box or heavy formatting or picture or anything like that. However, they do care what kind of font you use. So be careful about that, because a lot of fonts, it just won't read it and it turns it into garbage, and that's not helpful. The parsing systems, they do care if you use a text box or heavy formatting, because it just doesn't pick it up, period. And all that information goes poof, it disappears. You don't want that either. So keep your resume simple. That's my top tip for you. Let's see. Next, we will talk about your effective career growth strategy. And is there anywhere to learn how ATS works in order to optimize your resume? Yes, in fact, I've written an article about that. And I will share with you at the end of this webinar some of my contact information. You can shoot me a note and I will send you a link to that article. Now, the job search process can be pretty daunting, particularly maybe after some of the details I've shared with you. But don't worry, if you know the process and you leverage the tools, you will be fine and you will see success. So let's discuss what that looks like. First of all, we want to be prepared for a virtual job search. More interviews will be online than ever before. Okay. Now, what I'm seeing over the past couple of years is the tendency to have multiple, we're talking 6, 8, 10 interviews before they hire a candidate, which is a little crazy. It used to be about 3, and we thought that was a lot. Now it's way more than that. We're seeing a lot of interviews, and a lot of these are virtual. Another thing, and we'll be talking about this in a minute, is recorded interviews by AI. Woohoo! So if being on camera wasn't making you nervous enough, now you get to do it to a machine. The good news is many roles that are on hold will reopen. But keep in mind, you want to get your resume out there now, okay? And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, if there's an open job requisition, you want to get in there now, because post-pandemic, when this role unfreezes and they actually start, looking at the resumes they've sifted and vetted, they're not going to hit the restart button. They're going to go back to the ones that they've already sifted and vetted. They're going to call those people. You want to be in there in that pool, and you want to be called. The other reason is because there will be all those wait-and-seers, and they will hit the job search market, and it will be a total flood on the market. And it will be very difficult to stand out from all that noise. And we will discuss how you can stand out from all that noise, because it's not impossible, but it's best to get in front of the tsunami wave. Okay. And also expect less human contact and less human interaction than ever before moving forward, because people have found out that it saves a ton of time if you just, don't have to set aside a conference room and all this good stuff. You can just have virtual meetings. Also, in the far, far future, expect your personal AI to get you a job. Now, I know that's not applicable right now, but just keep in mind, those of you who are in your mid-career, early career, your personal AI will be getting your job in the future. You won't interact with anybody. That's coming. So just be prepared for that. Another thing, online compatibility. Embrace technology or be archived. Seriously. Like I mentioned before, all resumes must be online compatible. This is non-negotiable, and your LinkedIn profile will have even more of a role than it ever did. And it already is a huge role. I mean, the first place they will go when they receive your resume is, guess where? LinkedIn, right? So you have to have that LinkedIn profile polished. Now, when we're talking about remote work and you're comfortable, you're in a role, you're feeling good, but you're working remotely, how do you articulate your accomplishments? How do you articulate your brand? How does that come across? Well, I did actually do a LinkedIn Live, and it should still be available on my LinkedIn profile, about articulating your brand in a virtual space. So if you want more in-depth information about that, go there for sure and check that out. But for one thing, you really have to show up online, like bring it. Can you imagine if I gave this entire webinar talking like this with no expression? I mean, how many Zoom calls have we been on that we see all the people and they're all like, how awful? I mean, really? They all look like they're miserable. I mean, use your face. You have a face. Use it. Smile. That's your brand. How you look, what's going on in the background. You notice there's not a lot going on back here. Well, that's on purpose because I have seen some very interesting rooms. And you're always trying to figure out, because everything that is in that visual window reflects on you. And when it comes to articulating your brand, your dossier, which is your resume and your LinkedIn profile, it's important to fully flesh out your LinkedIn And if you have skills and expertise that you're not leveraging in your current role and you want that to be noticed, LinkedIn is a great place to do that. So hopefully that helps you. And thank you, by the way, for continuing to help each other out. I appreciate that. Y'all are awesome. So virtual networking, it's kind of awkward. We're working on it, and it will get better. So there will be a big push to make these virtual networking events more interactive, more agile, and more engaging. So think 3D, and you can pick an avatar. So you can be anybody. I'm not sure that's good. And it's interesting, in the LinkedIn Live, I also mentioned about authenticity and why there's such a cry for authenticity, because people know that you can pretty much be anybody you want online, more or less. So they really want to see who you are, other than just, this singular contact that they get to see. So the being authentic and sharing, which is super awkward for a lot of us, is really important. Okay, it helps build that know, like, trust factor, because in the absence of in-person, your body and brain just simply struggles to do that. So you really have to bring it virtually. So yeah, virtual networking is started, it's awkward, and it will be more prevalent moving forward. In fact, I'm expecting for Women's Masters Network that I'm on the board of, for at least some of our meetings to be continually to be virtual. Your online brand, as I mentioned before, platforms like LinkedIn are a great space for this in the absence of one-on-one contact. And as I mentioned before, you have to show up 100% for these meetings, and everything that is in that view, in this little view right here, matters. Okay, a lot. Now, how can you make your dossier stand out? Because this is very important. What can you do? And what can a job seeker do right now to stand out from the noise, particularly once all of these job seekers hit the market? What can you do? First of all, you can have a career target to aim for. Here's the deal. You need to be prepared, because even though we live in uncertain times, there is one thing that is certain. If you're not prepared, you can't take advantage of opportunities. Okay, so you have to have a target. And why do I say you have to have a target? Because those resumes that are very broad and general just do not make an impression. They don't get through this 3-stage gates of the application process: ATS, recruiter, hiring manager, because it's just, one, it's too general, it won't get through ATS, it's no job match. 2, for recruiters, their brains are finely tuned to look for patterns, and they're not seeing a pattern. Hiring managers look at your resume and go, well, this person doesn't know what they want to be when they grow up. So when you think about having a target to aim at, first of all, know what you're looking for, know what type of role, and then make sure that the roles you're seeking are related, that they're not too disparate. They're not too dispersed across the job search family tree. They're on the same branch, ideally in the same cluster, because it makes it much easier for you to express your career contributions more succinctly and more relevant to the jobs you're seeking, and you'll be able to express your LinkedIn dossier more succinctly and more relevant and more highly targeted. Are you getting a picture here? It's very, very important. So that's not all that's important, because also, as I mentioned before, having an online compatible resume is essential. Let's see. On the internet, no one knows you're a dog. That's pretty funny. Do you suggest going to virtual networking events not based in your hometown? Only if you want to go there and work there. Make sense? So yes, if you want to work there. No, it's a waste of time if you don't. If it's a networking event that a certain percentage from a company, and so a certain percentage of people that are attending from a certain company that you really want to work for remotely, now that makes sense as well. So there's 2 factors that make sense and one that just really doesn't. So use that wisely. So having an online compatible resume, as I mentioned before, what does that look like? Well, it's pretty plain. Yep, it's pretty boring, unfortunately. by necessity, because we don't know what kind of applicant tracking system that they are using. We don't know if it's an optical scanner. We don't know if they use parsing. We just don't know at our end. And how do you know you're interfacing with one is when you start to apply for the job, you click the link and you go and you have to create a username and password. You're in an applicant tracking system, period. So, however, if it says email your resume to, and is an internal extension for the company, so an internal email address for that company, you might not go through an applicant tracking system. However, if it's a recruiter, you will go through an applicant tracking system because they all have one. That's how they manage it. That's how they manage their candidate database. And what they do is that once you're in their database, and the first thing they do is they have an open job rec from an employer that they'll get commission on. And they go, okay, so I'm going to type these things in. Their applicant tracking system does the match. It brings up the first bunch of candidates. They call those people, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then they go from there. If they don't have enough candidates or a good enough match, then they search the internet. Make sense? And that's how the process works for the recruiting side. So your LinkedIn profile. The number one thing you can do is work on your profile picture. I know that sounds very simplistic. It is because human beings are highly visual. And the very first metric that their brains analyze is your face. You want to look approachable. It is important, very important. And for those of you who don't like smiling, get over it and smile, because you have to. You have to look approachable. That's very important. Also, in the About section, I highly recommend that you be relevant for the roles you're seeking, and you express a couple high-level career contribution stories about how you've leveraged your expertise to a real-life impact on the company, the client, or your team. So you want to mention that, and they're relevant to the jobs you're seeking. So those are the two big tips I have for you for your LinkedIn profile, but you have to have a presence. And for those of you who are wondering how many connections do you need, you don't have to have 500 connections to get a job. You don't. But if you do, that helps. Just be aware of LinkedIn scammers. So if someone reaches out to you and they have a very shallow profile, like there's a photo or no photo, and there's a lot of misspellings and there's not a lot of content, don't connect with them. You're better off. If you post your LinkedIn profile pic, people will know what race you are. Yes, you're right. And honestly, if that's a problem for someone, you don't want to work for them anyway. Just telling you, quite honestly. If that's a problem, then you don't want to work for them. I'm just being honest. When it comes to age and race discrimination or any sort of discriminatory practices, if that is an issue, then you don't want to work for them anyway. So don't let that hold you back. All right? Seriously. So prep for a digital job search. As I mentioned before, it's already a vastly digital landscape, so nothing much has changed there. And going forward, it will be even more emphasis on digital, fully digital. And there's a bit of a delay. Speaking of digital, get ready for the virtual interview. So we get to do something like this all the time. Isn't this awful? I'm kidding. So, how can you interview well through the camera? A lot of the same tips I've already shared about showing up online are tremendously useful. Leverage your tone of voice. You can modulate your voice. Do so. Because if I talked in a monotone the entire webinar, you would all be asleep in 5 minutes. No. Use your tone of voice to emphasize your points and what you have to say, and slow down. Oftentimes, when we're stressed, we speed up our speech. Slow it down. Don't go too slow, but just be measured. Take a deep breath. Practice the art of the pause. It's perfectly fine to pause. It gives the listeners a breathing room too. And leverage your face. Use your facial expressions, and just know that when you're interacting on a camera or a screen, you actually have to emphasize about 30% more than you would normally. So how you would normally like present yourself in person, you have to bring it 30% more, 30% more emphasis, 30% more emotion than you do in person, which is exhausting. Particularly if you're a reserved person. For those of you who identify with being more reserved, I have good news for you. The good news about being on camera is it's not all day. It's just for a finite period of time, and then you can go collapse afterwards. Because I will share with you that being someone who presents quite a bit in the virtual space, particularly now, it does take a lot of energy. But you need to show up and be aware of what's going on around you. I don't know how many people who I've seen have fans rotating on their heads, or I'm looking up their nose or something. You know, the lighting is just terrible and you can't really see them. So just be aware of the presence that you're bringing, because even though logically we should be able to filter these things out, our brains don't. And we jump to conclusions and we have biases based on the data from that little view screen. So how do you post that you're looking for a job? Well, number one, you should not ever say, as someone just mentioned, should your headline say looking for opportunities? No, don't. Don't have a seeking statement. Don't have a looking for opportunities anywhere on your headline. While logically you think that would make sense, we don't make decisions based on logic. That's not how human brains work. So research has shown that a vast majority of people who see that seeking opportunities have a negative bias against that person. So just don't use that language. It's not necessary. You can turn on that you're looking for a job. Recruiters can see that. It's totally unnecessary to say that you're seeking for opportunities, because quite frankly, you're wasting valuable real estate in your headline. In your headline, you should be talking about what skills and expertise you have that makes you an ideal candidate, not that you're seeking for opportunities. So think of your headline like that billboard on the side of the road. If you were to say, I have a billboard about you and your career, what would you say? And think about that. That's what you want in that headline, not seeking opportunities. Okay, laptop, camera at eye level. Put it on a pile of books. Yes, that's right. That's where mine is. Soft lighting in the front. Yeah, top tip. You can have a light on your desk. I don't right now because I'm in a sunroom and I have tons of sun, but you can have a light on your desk just out of camera view and have a white sheet of paper or a white cloth, and that reflects the light back in your face. So that's a great tip as well to help you be more presentable online. So let's talk about how to discover, how to take advantage of those opportunities that come your way, because that's very important moving forward. Well, first of all, position yourself wisely. And again, I will use the word relevance about 20 times to make sure it hits home. You have to be relevant to the jobs you're seeking. And that matters on multiple levels. So number one, and make sure that you're a higher job match rate through applicant tracking systems, and that recruiters, because recruiters have fine-tuned this tendency in our brains to look for patterns. So the human brain has a natural tendency to look for patterns. Recruiters have fine-tuned this into about 5 to 6 seconds or less. So yeah, it really has to be highly relevant, and they want to see that in the first half of the first page. And then hiring managers are looking for relevant examples of how you have contributed in your prior roles or current role. You're an asset to the company. They want to know how you're going to perform, full stop. And in other words, you have to be able to clearly articulate your accomplishments. This is very important. So what's missing? The vast majority of resumes are missing powerful impact statements. Now, what is an impact statement? It's a career contribution that is basically an explicit example of how you have leveraged your expertise and skills on the job to net a positive outcome or impact on the company, the client, your team, etc. This is missing in all of the resumes I have reviewed except for two. That's it. And I've reviewed a lot of resumes, and I've not ever seen one that's done a really good job. Only two people. So this is really, really important, because not only do you need a career target to aim at, you have to be able to express your contributions, okay? This is critical because your work does not speak for itself. You do. The vast majorities of resumes flying around the digital space do not discuss explicit examples of how they have impacted the company, the client, or their team. What is commonly seen is a mindless bullet point list of roles and responsibilities, which doesn't help you stand out. So if you want to evolve your dossier and you want to grab the attention of recruiters and hiring managers, you absolutely must provide explicit examples of how you've leveraged your expertise into a net positive impact on the business, your team, or your client. Have I said that enough yet? So this is very important, and this is how you stand out, particularly when it comes to that time when there's a flood of job seekers on the market. It's very easy to be general and make general statements and talk about roles and responsibilities, but there is no wow factor there. Your brand isn't there. There's no discussion of how you will deliver in the roles you are seeking. Does that make sense? So let's see, at Erin, should your LinkedIn profile be similar to your resume in terms of the literature, or should it be different? It does not have to be a carbon copy, but it does have to be similar. So what you don't want is the recruiter to get your resume, go to your LinkedIn profile and go, huh? No red flags. So there has to be consistency, but it doesn't have to be exact match if that's what you're asking. So let's talk about how, if I can find my mouse, how to develop your career contribution examples. So first of all, you want to create what I call an impact inventory. Now, impact inventory is quite literally a list of your career contribution examples, okay? And what you want to do is you want to start with your most recent position first and work your way backwards. And as you go back in history, you can be less detailed. But what you want to do is consider everything that you've done to positively impact your work, your team, your client, your company, whatever that looks like. And a lot of people get stuck because they think, well, I was just doing my job. Yeah, you were doing your job, but if you didn't do your job well, what would happen? Okay, think of it like that. And also consider, if you are hiring for you, what would you look for? That might help you as well. And most people also get stuck when they think they're bragging. Okay, there's no room for bragging in this process, because bragging is distorting the facts to, usually a selfish end. There's no room for distorting facts here. You are literally talking about facts in this impact inventory. So you want a value-driven dossier. Your entire dossier, your resume and your LinkedIn profile, must clearly communicate why you're an ideal candidate for these jobs. With more job seekers on the market, this step is non-negotiable. It just isn't. You have to do this. And we have to get over our fear of bragging and focus on the facts, express our impact of the work that we've done. Now, the challenge is here, we can probably, look at other people and find their value, but talking about yourself is hard. You can probably point out great abilities in your colleagues and friends, but it's a different story when the tables are turned. And to help you achieve success, I have a top 6 key points that I share with my clients. Now, the good news I have for you is you don't have to remember everything I say. So for those of you who might be writing notes, I will have a link at the end of this, and I'll also share it in the chat box so you can copy it. And also it will be in the email that I send everyone with the recording as well. So you'll get a chance to get my copy of the Impact Inventory Guide, which includes a lot of this information. So don't feel like you have to, think about everything, but I do want to cover the key top points with you. So one of the things you can consider if you struggle with this process is, what has been the biggest challenge that you've faced in accomplishing your role? So doing your job, what is some of the biggest challenges you faced? What did you do and how did it turn out? What resulted from your actions? What was the impact of your actions? Also, what are you most proud of? What are you most proud of accomplishing in your roles, and what are your biggest impacts? And if you can quantify those impacts, that's even better. Now, quantification would be percentages or dollars and cents. Now, here's something about dollars and cents. It's fine in the resume, but it's not public knowledge. You want to keep it off of your LinkedIn because LinkedIn is public forum. Fine in the resume, not always in LinkedIn. So just keep that in mind. If it's public knowledge and it's, even if it's not company-wide knowledge or if it's not just widely known and accepted, then you might not want to mention it on your LinkedIn profile. Okay. Another thing you can consider is, have you ever improved a process, a procedure, a communication, production, customer service, or have you avoided a risk? Like my husband, he's a reliability engineer. He doesn't sell things and increase revenue. Well, kind of increases revenue because with him on the job, it's more reliable, right? So you have a stronger bid point. But anyway, but he does avoid millions of dollars in risk. Now, quantifying that can be kind of tough. He's like, well, I don't know exactly how much. I was like, well, we can say millions, right? Well, yeah, billions probably. All right, well, fine. You avoid billions of dollars of risk. Great. And, if you have any idea how much that well produces, then you might know how many billions you just avoided dumping into the ocean. So that would be important. Those are things to consider. Also, if you are a salesperson, well, yeah, you need to talk about how much you increased in revenue, etc. Anything that you've done to positively impact your company, your team, vendors, customers, clients, or anything you've done to leverage your expertise is an impact, and you need to list that. Okay, does that make sense? I hope I'm getting through. Okay, because this is really important. So let's see. For a job that I'm applying for, my previous role is more aligned with my latest role. How to manage this? So probably your previous role. So not your current role or the one you just had, but the one before that. That's fine. What you can do is just emphasize that prior role and kind of minimize the most recent role, and then leverage some accomplishments and like on the first page or something like that from the previous role. So you just probably want to highlight some career accomplishments or something like that. But it's extremely important to articulate your value to stand out in the job search market or stand on the sidelines. Throughout this entire process, it's incredibly important to be specific. Don't fall back on general statements. Don't worry about bragging. This process isn't designed to support bragging. Okay, simply state the facts. Don't allow your inner critic to tell you that your career contributions don't matter. Last time I checked, your inner critic wasn't hiring anyone. So if you can ignore your inner saboteur, articulate your contributions, develop an online compatible resume, polish your LinkedIn profile, you will stand out and rise above the noise. When the pandemic passes, the job market will be flooded with applicants, and it's critical to prepare now and have the tools you need to land the job you want in the future of work. So keep that in mind. I have a free impact inventory guide, and I will be sharing this in email form with everyone that has registered for this webinar. So don't worry about having to type this down or jot it down or whatever. I will share in email form. Now, if you do not see it in your inbox by Monday, and you're like, where is my thing? Look in your spam box, because sometimes they go to spam. I don't think it will, but sometimes they do. So just check. The other thing that I'm providing during this current crisis is I have a Career Moves Masterclass, and I have a $100 discount on that Masterclass. So it is extremely and stupidly affordable. And we go over everything. Okay, what this is not, it is not a do-it-yourself class. It is, I am hosting this class. It's a group coaching class, and we go through 4 weeks of career contribution stories, developing your resume, developing your LinkedIn profile, how to manage recruiter calls when they ask you, tell me how much money you make, that kind of thing. Your job search, a proven job search strategy, and it saves you up to 75% in time looking for jobs, and it really does. And managing the interviews and networking online, interviewing for impact, how to lower your cortisol level during interviews so you can actually talk versus later going, oh man, I wish I'd said that. Now, if you're not interested in coaching, that's fine. I got $200 discount on my DIY. So you get all the materials. You just don't get me, and you don't get job support, but you still get all the goodies as far as the materials are concerned. Now, that $200 discount, quite honestly, it's crazy. It's really if you don't do it, I really don't know what to say. But links will be sent on email. Now, here is my contact information, and let's have Q&A time. Now, let me scroll back through here and I will start at the most recent, then I'll come back to whoever replies after Robert here. Does it matter if your career accomplishments didn't come from a full-time job? No, it doesn't matter. It actually could be from volunteer work. So those of you who are in transition, in other words, you do not currently have full-time employment and you're doing volunteer work to help keep skills sharp and network, your skills that you use during that time can be considered a career accomplishment. And if you're in transition and you're volunteering enough time, you can actually list that under your experience section on your LinkedIn. And that helps kind of bridge the gap. So it doesn't matter if it's a full-time job or a part-time job. Your career accomplishments are your career accomplishments, quite frankly. So is it a good idea to indicate your entrepreneurial experience on your resume if it's not related? If it's not related, it's not going to help you a whole lot. You want to be targeted and relevant to the jobs you're seeking, because if not, you'll have content, but the content won't be relevant to the people who are reading the resume for the roles you're seeking, if that makes sense. And depending on what type of entrepreneurial experience it is, you want to be careful about that, particularly if you're still doing that work, because some people, it'll be a red flag and they'll go, oh, how much time they're going to spend doing this versus our work, right? So just keep that in mind. Let's see. Watch It's a Wonderful Life for the 50th time and apply it to yourself. That's funny. Recruiters, hiring managers sometimes require proven track record of the statement only if it's a massive amount of dollars and cents. So the only time I have had anyone challenge me is for a career accomplishment that I actually did achieve, obviously, because I'm stating facts, for $19 million in improved production in less than 40 days. So that actually did happen, and I did have to save my project information, which fortunately, because the plant closed, was not subject to NDA, and I could actually prove that. But that's the only time they challenge. So just keep that in mind, that they don't always have to have proof, because a lot of your positions, quite frankly, you can't discuss the details because you have assigned a non-disclosure. And sorry, you just have to take my word for it. And there you go. So when they sometimes require a proven track record of the statements, that's not always logically sound. They can't always do that. Let's see. We answered that one. Let's see. We have a bunch of, I'm scrolling through the audiovisual challenges here. We posted you're looking for a job. We went that. Talked about that. All right, I think we've got the, okay, so new ones, here we go. Can you share a couple of examples of resumes that you consider will be successful in a job search? So in other words, you want to sample resumes. What I can do is I can send you a snapshot in the email that I send out. Now keep in mind, some of this information, my format is intellectual property. Okay, so I'm a little loath to go share that with everybody for obvious reasons, because it is a format I designed and I came up with, and if I could patent it, I would, but I don't think I can. Maybe I can, I'm not sure, but it is IP. So I'll share what I can, all right, to help you out. Can you quantify your work experience if it is not easily measurable? That's always a challenge, isn't it? Because oftentimes we have impacts that, well, it's tough to nail down what might have been the outcome. So here's the thing. You can estimate within reason, okay? If you save time is money, and then you can figure out, okay, how many people were involved in whatever it was, what's their average salaries, and if I save them 10 hours a week, for instance, then you could extrapolate over the lifetime of that project and ongoing, however long you were at that role. So it's not just the time of the project, or it's not just a one-off incident, it's the entire time you were hired. That's the career contribution. Because if you hadn't been there, there would have been no career contribution, right? So So the entire time you were there. So you want to extrapolate it that long. And a lot of people don't do that because maybe the initial figure was, a couple thousand or a couple 100,000. But actually, if you were there 20 years, it might be a lot more than that. So just keep that in mind. For those of you who do project work, I recommend creating a project addendum. And that is a living document. And by the way, so is the impact inventory. It's also a living document. You want to be continually adding to this as you move forward in your career. And I recommend doing that about every 3 months while your memory is fresh, because you'll find when you start working on this that, well, it's difficult to remember details, and you don't always have access to the information you need to quantify that information, right? So while you are in the roles, be sure to continually add to your impact inventory, because it not only helps your dossier, your LinkedIn, and your resume, it also helps tremendously when it comes to performance reviews, because your bosses, even if they work right next door to you, may not have an idea of exactly what you do and the impact of it. Don't expect that, because people are in their own heads and they've got their own narrative going on. They're not all about your business. So the other thing is preparing for interviews is huge. I'll leverage this with preparing for interviews as well, because once you are able to articulate your career contributions, it's much easier to answer that question. Tell me about a time when. Well, you'll have it right at top of mind. So let's see. How do you justify a considerable gap in employment? 1 year. That's not considerable. It's not. 1 year is not a considerable gap. Seriously, not considerable. There are many people who have taken a career pause to start a family or take care of loved ones for whatever reason, whatever's going on in their life. Maybe some people pause to seek higher, more education. So if you've taken a career pause, first of all, address the why you did it, and don't feel like you should ignore it, because that's one of the mistakes I see, is that people try to pretend like it didn't happen. Life happens, and we all know that. So if you took a career pause for whatever reason, articulate that in your resume. Career pause due to starting a family, taking care of a loved one, illness, whatever. I'll be careful about the illness part. I hate to say that. I really wish I could say don't worry about it, but let's be real here. Companies want to look at their bottom line. And I have a client who has fully recovered from cancer and chemo, and she can't express any of her career pause for the fact that she was ill on her dossier, because, companies don't want to hire her because she might be a potential risk. And that's sad. It really is sad, but what can you do? So you want to address it. You also keep in mind, if you have taken a pause or you are considering taking a pause, whether it's voluntary or not, volunteer your time, be active, work on a certification. Right now is a great time to work on a certification. Get a certification, get further your education, do some work, stay active in your networking, stay on top of trends, because what you don't want is that gap to mean you really have a gap. Does that make sense? And also note that if you did have to take some time off to take care of a family member or start a family, you probably did leverage some skills there, so you can articulate that a little bit within reason. Let's see. For people with 20 plus years of experience, do you list all of your career or just the last 10 years? Usually about the last 10 years, although you can go back as far as year 2000, depending on the types of roles you're seeking. So I do want to wrap this up because we're just 5 minutes over the hour. So if you do have any more questions, please get them in. And just note that you can price yourself out of a job if you are saying, oh, I've got 25 years experience, but you're going for roles that don't need 25 years experience. Don't think that's going to give you a guaranteed job. All it is telling them how much money they think you want, which might mean that prices you out of a job. So I recommend, unless having or demonstrating that much experience, like the 25 years, 10 years, 35 years, whatever it is, it will absolutely for certain help you. And that's usually for senior level roles, executive roles. Okay. Unless you're sure, I would take it off. I wouldn't mention how many years of experience that I had. And then on your resume, certainly not on your LinkedIn, and on your resume, if you're applying for a job that's looking for, I don't know, 15 years experience, then say you have 15 years experience, be relevant. Even if you have 18 or 20. Make sense? You want to be relevant. And by the way, they can do the math, so you don't really have to say anything at all. But the year 2000 is the cutoff, the hard cutoff for, excuse me, for your dossier. So I hope that helps. And I don't see any more questions coming in. So it's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. I will follow up with the recording and the information that I mentioned. So the links to the masterclass, as well as the discounts that are available, and they are really exceptional value. I'm not just saying that because it's me. And if you want to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And if you do have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me via email. Thank you all, and it's been a pleasure.